You think your life is hard? Imagine waking up at 26 years old, still living in your mother's basement in Chicago, with nothing but a college degree that promised everything and delivered nothing. Imagine the smell of that basement, the cold radiator hissing in winter, the weight of your own failure pressing down on you like gravity. Now, imagine knowing, absolutely knowing, that this was not supposed to be your life. This is where our story begins, not with a triumph. Not with a breakthrough, but with complete and total desperation. MJ DeMarco graduated from Northern Illinois University in 1990 with 2 degrees. Marketing and finance. Double major, the kind of kid who did everything right. Yet by 1995, he was delivering pizzas at night, working flower delivery shifts, doing newspaper routes at 3 in the morning in the frozen darkness. He was a college-educated man living with his mother, watching his classmates climb corporate ladders while he sank deeper into a hole that seemed to have no bottom. But here's what nobody tells you about failure. Sometimes it's the greatest teacher that ever existed. And sometimes the darkest moment of your life is actually the moment right before everything changes. This is the untold story of how one man failed 17 times before discovering the exact formula that separated ordinary people from millionaires. This is the story of MJ DeMarco. And by the end, you're going to understand why your freedom today depends on learning what he learned. Stay with me. The setup, the trap. Nobody sees coming. Let's rewind to 1990. MJ is 22 years old, fresh out of university. The world is open. The future is bright. His parents taught him the formula that every American learns: go to school, get good grades, get a good job. Work hard for 40 years, retire comfortably at 65. This was the script, the master plan, the roadmap to happiness. There was just one problem. It was a mathematical lie. MJ didn't know this yet. He was too busy following the script exactly as written. He accepted job after job in corporate environments. He showed up early, he stayed late, he smiled at his bosses. He networked. He did everything the system told him to do. And yet, year after year, his bank account stayed empty. Picture this. It's 1993 in Chicago. The weather is exactly what you'd expect. Grey, cold, the kind of cold that doesn't just freeze your skin, but seems to penetrate your hope itself. MJ is in his mid-20s now. He's worked dead-end jobs for 3 years. He's watched his peers get promotions, get bonuses, start planning down payments on houses. And he's still delivering flowers on the weekends. Then something happens that changes everything. He's at an ice cream shop on a sunny day, one of the rare Chicago days when the sun actually decides to show up. And he sees a car. Ooh. Not just any car. A white Lamborghini Countach, the kind of vehicle that doesn't exist in his world. The kind of car that belongs to rock stars and drug dealers and people from movies. And out of this car steps a young man, maybe 25. Maybe 26. Not much older than MJ himself. MJ approaches him. He can't help it. The words come out. What do you do? The man smiles. He probably knew exactly why MJ was asking. Because people don't drive Lamborghinis by working normal jobs. The answer should be, I'm a professional athlete, or I'm an actor, or I inherited money, something that explains the impossible. Instead, the young man says 4 words that would haunt MJ for the rest of his life. I'm an inventor, that's it. No more explanation needed. The man wasn't old. He wasn't famous. He wasn't connected to anyone important. He was just a young inventor who had solved a problem, and that solution had made him wealthy. The sound of that Countach's engine still echoing in MJ's ears as it drove away. This moment shattered everything MJ believed about how the world worked. You didn't need to be special. You didn't need to be famous. You didn't need to be born lucky. You just needed to solve a problem that people would pay you to solve. You needed to be a producer, not a consumer. You needed to create value, not trade time. But knowing the answer and actually implementing it are 2 completely different things. For the next 3 years, MJ tried everything. He joined network marketing companies, 4 different ones. He bought into MLM kits that promised untold riches. He purchased real estate courses from late-night infomercials. He tried to distribute fitness supplements. He started an automotive audio business specializing in subwoofer boxes. He attempted jewelry resale. Nothing worked. And here's the thing about failing over and over again. Each failure doesn't just take your money, it takes a piece of your soul. By 1996, MJ was in a dark place, a genuinely dark place. He's 26 years old, he has a college degree, his mother is still supporting him. He's seen 17 different opportunities fail. He's lost thousands of dollars on systems designed to make other people rich. He's reading the "Get Rich Quick" ads in the back of magazines, not realizing that the only people getting rich were the people selling the ads. And on a freezing Chicago evening, sitting in that basement room, something breaks inside him. "I cannot live this life anymore." Those are his exact words. He didn't think it, he knew it, with absolute certainty. This path, living with his mother, dead-end jobs, borrowed dreams, was not a life, it was a prison. And he had to escape, but he had no money, no connections, no special talents. What he had was desperation. And sometimes, desperation is the most powerful fuel of all. The breaking point, burning the boats. By late 1996, MJ had made a decision. He was leaving Chicago, but not for another corporate job, not for another MLM scheme. He was going to make a complete break from everything that wasn't working. He saved up $900. That's not a typo. $900. In today's money, that's roughly $1,500. That's his entire startup capital. That's all he has to escape his life, start over, and build a business from scratch. And he chose Phoenix. Why Phoenix? Because it was the opposite of Chicago in every possible way. Chicago was grey and cold and depressing. Phoenix was warm and sunny, and represented something new. He was going to literally move to the opposite climate to shake off the cobwebs of his old life. This is the kind of dramatic thinking you develop when you're truly desperate, when you understand that small changes won't work, that you need to burn the boats and make escape impossible. In late 1997, with those $900, MJ packed up what little he owned and drove to Phoenix, Arizona. The first thing he did was find a tiny studio apartment, not because he wanted to live there, but because he had to. Survival mode. The apartment had a futon as furniture. He could feel the temperature constantly. In the summer, it was brutally hot, over 100 degrees. The kind of heat that makes you understand that the sun is a weapon. To pay rent, he did what he could do. He drove a limousine, 8 hours a day, sometimes more, picking up business people, seeing the glass partition between him and his passengers as a barrier between him and success. These were people with power, people with influence, people whose lives mattered, and he was invisible. But here's where the story pivots. Because MJ was driving a limo, he noticed something. Travelers coming into Phoenix wanted to know where to find limos, where to find reliable transportation, but there was no central database, no directory, no way for someone new to the city to find quality limo services. They had to ask hotel concierges or search through phone books or make random calls. This was a market inefficiency, a problem that people would pay to solve. And MJ had an idea. The pivot from consumer to producer. Now, you need to understand something crucial here. MJ wasn't a tech genius. He wasn't a programmer. He was just a desperate guy in a studio apartment who noticed a problem. But desperation combined with necessity creates innovation. That's the secret formula that nobody teaches you in business school. He taught himself to code, bought a book on HTML, sat in that studio apartment with a chunky CRT monitor, the fan on his computer tower humming constantly in the Phoenix heat, and he built a website. Not a fancy website, not a beautiful website, but a functional website that solved a real problem. It was a simple directory. You went there, you typed in your city, you found limo services. The limo companies paid to be listed. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was useful. And here's the part that most people miss. MJ didn't get rich quick with this business. He didn't suddenly make $1 million. In fact, for the first year or so, it was slow, painfully slow. He was still driving the limo, still living in the studio, still broke. But something was different now. He was earning money that wasn't directly tied to his time. If he drove a limo for 8 hours, he made the money for those 8 hours. But if he slept, the website still existed. People still found it. Limo companies still paid to be listed. Money came in while he was sleeping. This is the moment that everything changed. Not because he got rich, but because he understood the truth that the inventor in the ice cream shop had tried to teach him. Process creates wealth, not luck, not inheritance, not connections. Process. By 1999 and 2000, Lemos.com was becoming a real business. Not enormous, but real. The dot-com boom was happening. Money was flowing into internet companies. Every website seemed to have potential. Every domain seemed valuable. And somehow, miraculously, MJ's little limo directory was getting noticed. In 2000, he received an offer, a substantial offer. The buyer offered him approximately $1.2 million for the company. It was before taxes. But after taxes, it would still be enough to change his life completely. Enough to never drive a limo again. Enough to have breathing room. Enough to actually own his future. He was 28 years old. He had failed 17 times. And now, finally, success. He took the deal. The crash, when victory becomes defeat. But here's where the story takes a turn that most people don't know about. Because MJ's success story isn't actually about the first sale, it's about what happened after the first sale. The company that bought Lemos.com, they went bankrupt. In 2001, during the dot-com crash, they collapsed. And suddenly, the money that MJ had sold his company for became worthless. The company he had built was tangled up in bankruptcy proceedings. And he was standing in the middle of a financial disaster that he didn't create, but had to survive. Most people would have given up. After everything he'd been through, after finally achieving success, to have it snatched away by forces completely outside his control, that would break most people. But MJ did something remarkable. He bought his company back for pennies on the dollar, approximately $250,000. Which sounds like a lot, but compared to the $1.2 million he had received, it was nothing. The asset that had been valued at over $1 million was now his for a fraction of that price. And he did something even more remarkable than that. He rebuilt it. From 2001 to 2007, MJ took the broken pieces of his previous success and rebuilt Lemos.com into a genuine cash flow machine. $200,000 in monthly profit. Not one-time revenue, but recurring, predictable, beautiful profit every single month. By 2007, he sold the company again, this time to a private equity firm, this time for a multi-million-dollar exit that was secure. That couldn't disappear overnight, but by then MJ had learned the real lesson, the real secret. Wealth isn't an event, it's a process. The philosophy, why most people stay broke. If you've made it this far into this story, you're about to understand something that 99% of people never figure out. And once you know it, you can never unknow it. It will change how you see your own potential. He didn't get rich because he was smarter than everyone else. He got rich because he understood something fundamental about how money works that most people never learn. And that understanding changed everything. Think about your life right now. How much of your income depends directly on your time? If you have a job, your answer is 100%. You trade 8 hours of your life for a paycheck. If you don't go to work, you don't get paid. You are a slave to time. Your income is capped by the number of hours you can possibly work in a day. This is what MJ calls the slow lane. The path that society tells you to take. Work hard. Save 10% of your income. Invest it in the stock market. Hope that compound interest works its magic over 40 years. Hope you don't get sick. Hope the market doesn't crash. Hope you don't die before you can actually enjoy your retirement. But there's a mathematical problem with this approach. If you're saving 10% of your income, then you're living on 90%, which means you're spending almost everything you make. The math doesn't work. You will never reach true wealth following this path. Now, MJ discovered something different, what he calls the fast lane. And this is where the myth-busting begins. Because everything you've been taught about getting rich is partially true but strategically wrong. You've been told to follow your passion and the money will follow. But that's a dangerous lie. MJ followed passion with those 17 failed businesses. Passion didn't pay his rent. You've been told to save more. Save your money. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, saving $5 a day for 40 years isn't going to make you a millionaire. The math is brutal. You've been told that the market always goes up in the long term. Invest your money and compound interest will make you rich. But compound interest requires capital. Capital requires income. And if you're trading time for money, you'll never have enough capital to make compound interest actually matter. Here's the real truth. The barrier to entry determines the opportunity. If anyone can do it, nobody will get rich doing it. When MJ was in network marketing, the barrier to entry was low, $50 starter kit, anyone could join. Which meant everyone was selling to everyone. Which meant nobody was making money except the people at the top who sold the system itself. When Limos.com launched, the barrier to entry was higher. You needed to understand websites. You needed to understand business. You needed to understand the limo industry. Not impossible, but difficult enough that not everyone could do it. Which meant less competition. Which meant actual profit. This is why all the easy money systems are scams. Because if it's easy, everyone does it. And if everyone does it, there's no money. The people making money from get rich easy. Systems are selling the systems, not using them. The hidden layer, the math of freedom. Now here's something that most people don't understand about MJ's exit. When he sold Limos.com for multi-millions, people assumed he was done working, that he retired on a yacht, that he was living some fantasy life of pure leisure. The reality is more interesting than that. MJ calculated that to live comfortably without working, he needed approximately $40,000 to $60,000 per month in passive income. That's roughly $500,000 to $720,000 per year. Not $1 billion, not insanely high. Just enough to live well and never have to work again. And here's the beautiful part. That level of income is achievable. It's not lucky. It's not based on inheritance. It's mathematical. If you have a net worth of $10 to $15 million and it's earning even a modest 3 to 5% return annually, you get there. Most people hear 10 to 15 million and think it's impossible. But it's not impossible if you actually understand how to build businesses that produce profit. If you understand that a business generating $200,000 in monthly profit is worth anywhere from $5 to $15 million depending on the buyer, the growth rate, and the stability of the revenue. This is the secret that separates millionaires from everyone else. They think in terms of business value, not salary. They build things that other people want to buy. They create systems that generate revenue independent of their time. And then they sell those systems to people willing to pay premium prices. What is your employer actually buying from you? Your time. 8 hours of your life in exchange for a paycheck. What is MJ's Limos.com buyer actually buying? A system that generates $200,000 every month. Forever. As long as they own it. Do you see the difference? This is why, if you want to be rich, stop doing what poor people do. The 17 attempts, analyzing the pattern of failure. Let's go back to those 17 attempts. Because they weren't random. They followed a pattern, and understanding that pattern is the real treasure of this story. Attempts 1 through 4 were network marketing organizations. All of them failed because the barrier to entry was zero. Anyone could join. Therefore, the opportunity was zero. Too much competition, not enough profit margin. And the only people making real money were the founders of the systems. Attempt 5 was a fitness supplement distribution. Same problem. High competition, no profit. Attempt 6 was automotive audio. Slightly higher barrier, because it required product knowledge and customer relationships. But still not high enough. Still too much competition. Each of these failures taught him something. Each one brought him closer to understanding the real formula. But he didn't understand it intellectually. He understood it through pain. By the time he got to Limos.com, he had failed so many times that he wasn't trying to get rich. He was just trying to solve a problem. He had lost his ego. He had lost his desperation for quick money. He just wanted to build something useful, and that's when it actually happened. Think about that for a second. The moment he stopped trying to get rich, the moment he stopped chasing money, the moment he focused on building something valuable, that's when the money finally came. This is the inverse of what the get-rich-quick gurus teach you. They teach you to visualize money. They teach you to manifest wealth. They teach you to believe harder. MJ discovered something different. He discovered that wealth follows value. Build something valuable. Solve a real problem. Create a real business. And the wealth takes care of itself. The modern lesson. Why your future depends on this now. Let me make this relevant to your life. Because this isn't ancient history. This isn't some dusty story from the past. The principles that MJ discovered in 1997 are more important right now in 2025 than they've ever been. Think about what's happening in the world today. Everyone is doing dropshipping. Everyone is starting a Shopify store. Everyone is doing print on demand. Everyone is trying to resell courses. Everyone has a side hustle. That's basically a hobby with delusions of grandeur. Why does it feel like everyone is failing? Because everyone is doing it. The barrier to entry is near zero. You don't need to understand business. You don't need to understand the market. You just need a Shopify account and $500, which means everyone can do it, which means nobody gets rich doing it. The people making money from dropshipping are not the dropshippers. They're the people selling dropshipping courses. They're the people who have already succeeded and are now selling systems to help you fail faster. This is exactly what MJ went through with those 17 failed attempts. And he's been warning about this pattern for years. Or think about the gig economy. Everyone drives for Uber or DoorDash thinking they're entrepreneurs. But who's actually getting rich? The people who own the Uber platform. The Uber shareholders. Not the drivers who are trading their time for minimum wage and mileage wear on their vehicles. This is gig economy version 1.0. And it's going to destroy the financial futures of millions of people who think they're being smart by being their own boss, while actually just working for a platform owner who pays them a fraction of what they generate. MJ was a limo driver. He realized the driver never gets rich, the platform owner gets rich, so he became a platform owner, not through complexity, just through understanding the fundamental economics of value creation and capture. Here's what's even more relevant now. Artificial intelligence. The rise of automation. All of the automation that's happening right now is eliminating jobs that depend on trading time for money. The Slowlane is becoming obsolete. You can't compete with AI on time-based income. You'll lose every single time. But what AI can't do is replace human innovation and problem-solving. AI can't understand what problems people haven't realized they have yet. AI can't build the bridge between a problem and a solution in the exact way that a human entrepreneur can. This is why MJ's philosophy is going to matter more and more, because the future is not about who can work the hardest or the longest. It's about who can build the most valuable solutions, and that's a skill you can learn. The Depression. Diary, the human cost of failure. But we need to acknowledge something that the success story often glosses over. The 17 failures weren't just statistical blips. They were devastating. They were soul-crushing. And MJ has kept evidence. In his garage, there is an orange plastic crate. In that crate are journals. Depression diaries from the years when he was living with his mother, failing repeatedly, seeing his friends succeed while he stagnated. In those journals, he wrote devastating things about himself. I am a burden to my mother. I am 26 years old and have nothing. I am a failure. I will always be a failure. These weren't gentle doubts. These were the kind of dark thoughts that come from genuine despair. At the age of 24, he wrote about how he was ashamed to be seen by friends. He wore his shame like a coat. When he was driving a limo and picked up successful business people, he would raise the glass partition so he wouldn't have to hear their conversations about their deals, their victories, their lives, because hearing them would remind him how far he was from where he was supposed to be. The stress affected his health. It affected his relationships. It affected his fundamental sense of self-worth. For years, he believed he was a loser. Not because he was a loser, but because the world was telling him he was a loser, because society had given him a scorecard and he was failing every metric. But then something changed. And this is the crucial moment that most people miss. When MJ was driving a limo in Phoenix, making minimum wage plus tips, surviving on almost nothing, he received a check. It was for $30. A tiny payment for a lead that had come through his limos.com website. $30. That's nothing. That's a meal at a restaurant. That's a tank of gas. But to MJ, it was everything, because it proved something that the depressed voice in his head had been denying. It proved that he could create value. It proved that he could earn money in a way that didn't depend on his time. It proved that his ideas had worth. And even though $30 was nothing in terms of money, it was everything in terms of hope. He kept that check. He stared at it. He felt something shift inside him. For the first time in a long time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't a failure. Maybe he was just a person in the early stages of a success that he couldn't yet see. And that belief, fragile and small as it was, became the foundation for everything that came next. The real lesson, the difference, between getting rich and staying rich. By now, you understand how MJ got rich by solving problems, by building valuable systems, by shifting from consumer to producer, by understanding the mathematics of wealth creation. But here's what separates MJ from the thousands of people who get rich and then lose it all. When MJ sold limos.com the first time for $1.2 million, he was tempted to do exactly what most winners do: spend it, buy the Lamborghini, upgrade the lifestyle, celebrate the win. But he didn't do that. He understood something that most lottery winners and sudden millionaires don't. Getting rich is one skill. Staying rich is a different skill, and it's the more important one. Morgan Housel wrote a brilliant book called The Psychology of Money, and the core thesis is that your relationship with money determines your long-term wealth, not your income or your intelligence. People with high incomes go broke. People with average incomes build fortunes. The difference is in the psychology. MJ developed a psychology of abundance through caution. When he sold the company, he didn't change his lifestyle dramatically. He didn't buy a mansion. He didn't start spending recklessly. He understood that the real wealth comes from the system generating cash flow, not from the lump sum. When the buyer went bankrupt and his company became available to repurchase for a fraction of the original price, he had the capital to do it because he hadn't spent the money he had received. He had preserved it, protected it, kept it liquid and ready for opportunity. And when opportunity knocked, he was prepared. Most people would have been devastated to lose their buyer, to see their company tied up in bankruptcy. MJ saw a chance to buy back an asset at a massive discount and rebuild it even stronger. This is the mentality of genuine wealth, not desperation, not greed, but clarity about what matters and patience about building it. The modern connection, dropshipping, side hustles, and the illusion of entrepreneurship. Now let me connect this story to what's happening right now in your world, because the patterns that trapped MJ in failure for years are still active today, and they're more dangerous than ever because they're wrapped in new packaging. The rise of side hustle culture is a perfect example. Young people are being told that they can become entrepreneurs through dropshipping, print on demand, reselling courses, creating content, and 100 other passive income schemes that are anything but passive. The barrier to entry is zero. Anyone with a credit card can start, which means the opportunity is zero. Everyone is competing for the same margins. And the platforms, Shopify, Amazon, TikTok, Instagram, are the only ones actually getting rich. This is exactly what happened with MJ's MLM attempts. Except this time, it's wrapped in the language of entrepreneurship and independence. The truth is brutal. If you can start it with $500 and no expertise, then 50,000 other people have already started it. You're not first. You're not special. You're just one of 50,000 people trying to do the exact same thing with the exact same tools. The only way out is to do what MJ did. Raise the barrier to entry. Build something that requires expertise. Solve a problem that most people haven't even realized they have. Create something that's difficult to copy. This is why, in 2025, the path to wealth is not through dropshipping. It's through building genuine businesses that solve genuine problems in novel ways. The warning: why artificial intelligence? Change is everything. Here's something that we need to talk about that's absolutely relevant right now. Artificial intelligence is going to make the slow lane completely obsolete faster than we think. Jobs that depend on trading time for money are being eliminated, not someday, right now. Writing jobs, programming jobs, customer service jobs. These are being automated at exponential speed. The premise of work hard for 40 years and retire is collapsing. But here's the interesting part. What can't be automated is the human ability to identify problems and create novel solutions. What can't be automated is genuine entrepreneurship. What can't be automated is the skill of building systems that generate value. This is why MJ's philosophy is going to become more important, not less. Because the future belongs to the people who can create, not the people who can execute standardized tasks. And that's actually good news. Because creation is something you can learn. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to inherit money. You don't need to be lucky. You just need to understand the pattern that MJ discovered. Identify a problem, build a solution. Raise the barrier to entry so that you have an unfair advantage. Scale the solution. And then capture the value you've created. This is how wealth actually works, not through lottery tickets or inheritance or luck, but through systematic problem solving and value creation. The final lesson, the orange crate in his garage. Let me bring us back to where we started, that orange crate in MJ's garage. The one containing the depression diaries from his darkest years, the journals where he called himself a failure. The evidence of years of pain and struggle and doubt. You know what's remarkable about that crate? MJ keeps it. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't pretend those years didn't happen. He keeps it as a reminder of where he came from and why the journey matters. Because here's the truth that nobody tells you about success. It's not a moment. It's not a finish line. It's a process. And the process includes failure. It includes doubt. It includes years where you feel like you're going nowhere. The 17 failures weren't obstacles to success. They were part of the education. They were the price of entry. They were the lessons that most people never learn because they give up too early. When MJ was in that studio apartment in Phoenix, living on almost nothing, driving a limo during the day and coding at night, he didn't know he was about to build something worth millions. He didn't know that the little website he was building would eventually generate $200,000 in monthly profit. He just kept going. Because the alternative, going back to Chicago, going back to living with his mother, going back to that life of quiet desperation, was worse than the uncertainty of the future. And that's the real secret. Not the business model, not the strategy, but the willingness to endure discomfort for the possibility of something better, the ability to keep going when everyone else quits. The challenge. What are you going to do about it? So here you are. You've heard the story. You understand the pattern. You know that the path MJ discovered works. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because understanding something intellectually and actually implementing it are two completely different things. Thousands of people have read The Millionaire Fastlane. Thousands have understood the philosophy. But most of them go back to their lives unchanged. Back to their jobs. Back to trading time for money. Back to hoping that the slow lane will work out. I'm asking you to be different. I'm asking you to actually apply this. Not someday. Not when you have more time or more money. But right now, today. Look at your life. Look at where your income comes from. How much of it is directly tied to your time? If the answer is all of it, then you need to change. Identify a problem that you notice. Something that's inefficient. Something that frustrates people. Something that causes pain. Not a problem you invented. A real problem that real people have right now. Build a solution. Not a perfect solution. Not a revolutionary solution. Just something that works. Something that helps. Something that a person would be willing to pay for, and then scale it, build systems. Automate processes. Remove yourself from the equation. The goal isn't to work hard. The goal is to create something that works without you having to be there. This isn't theoretical. This isn't someday, maybe. MJ did it with $900 in a studio apartment. He didn't have advantages. He didn't have special talents. He just had desperation, determination, and eventually understanding. You have something he didn't have. You have the warning. You know the pattern. You know what doesn't work. You know what does work. That's an advantage that most people never get. The ultimate truth, why this matters to your freedom. Let me close with this. The reason this story matters is not because it's an inspiring tale of one person overcoming odds. It matters because the future of your freedom depends on understanding what MJ discovered. The world is changing rapidly. Automation, the collapse of traditional careers. These things are happening right now. And most people are hoping that somehow the old system will still work, that they'll still have a job in 10 years. That they'll still be able to trade time for money at a rate that allows them to save something. That hope is dangerous. That hope is the same hope that kept MJ in Chicago, living with his mother, failing at MLM businesses for years. The only way to actually secure your future is to do what MJ did. Build something, create value. Own a piece of something that generates income independent of your time. This isn't selfish, this isn't greedy, this is smart. This is survival. Because in the world that's coming, the people who have optionality will have freedom. And the people without optionality will be dependent on systems that may not exist in 5 years. You're at a choice point right now. You can go back to your normal life, back to your job, back to your routine, and that's fine. Many people make that choice. They're comfortable. They have stability. They're okay with that. Or you can do what MJ did. You can look at the system that's supposed to provide your security, understand that it doesn't actually provide security anymore, and you can decide to build something different. Something that's yours, something that can't be taken away by an employer or an economy or a system that doesn't care about you. This is the choice that MJ made in 1996. This is the choice that every person who's achieved genuine wealth has made at some point. This is the choice that's in front of you right now. Which will you choose? If you've made it this far, you're already thinking differently. You're already questioning the system. You're already wondering if there's a better way, and there is. MJ found it. Thousands of people have followed the path he discovered, and if you want to follow that path, you have to subscribe. You have to understand that this is a journey, not a destination. You have to commit to learning, testing, failing, iterating, and building until you've created something that works. You have to accept that this might take 5 years or 10 years or more, but the alternative spending 40 years trading time for money is worse. Comment below and tell me, what problem are you noticing that nobody else is solving? What inefficiency frustrates you? What could you build that would make people's lives better? Because that problem, that frustration, that gap, that's where your path to freedom begins. The orange crate in MJ's garage contains evidence of failure. But it also contains evidence of something more important, the willingness to keep trying, the willingness to learn from failure, the willingness to change. Be different. Be the person who notices the pattern. Be the person who learns from MJ's journey. Be the person who actually does something about it. Your future freedom depends on it.